Okay, so I think basically last class we covered kind of basic transformations of objects, such as by using the rotate, scale, reflect, and so on tools. And um, I think I started getting into swatches and patterns, and showed you how to edit patterns and also work with brushes and create new brushes. One thing that I forgot to mention about just color swatches, and this is something someone asked me that was really helpful to remind me, um, that basically when you apply a color um, to an object, let's say I make this box magenta, and then also apply an opacity to this object, then maybe you end up realizing that you really like this color, but right now it's just an opacity. So if I put it above something else, it's going to see through. And there's a really easy way to create new color swatches from transparent objects, and that's by selecting the object and going to object and clicking on flattening transparency. And there are a lot of settings here that basically you don't really need to worry about. They more relate to kind of switching between vector effects and kind of raster art. So basically you can just click OK, and so what happens is that now I end up with this box as a solid non-transparent color. And if you have this particular object selected and you have your fill swatch activated, you can go into the swatches panel and just click on adding a new swatch, and you can see that it's basically I put the opacity at 30%, and so it's gives you that color that you can just add to your swatch library, and so it's going to show up here. And also a sort of handy tip to know is that if you have a file with existing swatches and you want to bring them into another Illustrator file, then once again, what you can do is just copy paste those colors. So usually I just have a series of boxes that are filled with a particular color, and then I paste it to a document, and you can select multiple objects. So I can, and of course you can add existing swatches again into a kind of new subfolder. So if I have, let's say, these three objects, and once again you just need to have your fill active instead of your stroke. You can create a new color group, and you can see that you can create them from the from the selected artwork, and so there's a new folder made with just these colors, which is a pretty expedient way to bring over different swatches from one file to another. If you are working with patterns, then as soon as you paste an object with a pattern into a file, that pattern is going to appear in your swatches panel. And of course, you can at will kind of drag and delete some of them if you don't want to have them. Like I'm usually kind of annoyed by these default gradients that aren't really, I never use them. And then I just want to bring your attention to the fact that you can also define your own swatch and pattern libraries. So you can see here I have this custom swatches panel that I mean, right now it doesn't look like much. It's basically the standard CMYK colors and grayscale colors, and then it looks like there are two patterns in it. But you can always override these files, and so even if you, let's say, update your Illustrator to a new version, you will have access to these custom libraries, and it's a quick way to basically if you have certain hatches and patterns and colors that you use to be able to access those and not have to recreate things. Okay, and then yeah, so I think sort of got into looking at different strokes, and so I think you are probably familiar with using different line types and creating dash lines, for instance. So if you click on the different examples, you can see um, their settings. Um, just to recap, make sure that when you're looking at a particular panel, so right now I'm looking at the stroke panel, you show all the options because the default arrangement would, many of those would be hidden. Yeah, and I guess just talking about strokes and fields, once again, keep in mind if you that if you transform objects, so let's say I want to scale these, there's an option to scale these strokes and effects. So sometimes it actually will be really helpful to have access to this option. Let's say you realize you need to make a drawing bigger and like much bigger in scale, and the line weights have to follow along, or the spacing of a dashed line should follow along. And instead of having to think about the scaling and changing the numbers, the spacing of the dashes manually, you can just check that box to scale the strokes and effects as opposed to having to do it manually. So many of these settings I'm talking about will show up in different applications. And then also, I'm not sure if I actually pointed out, but the three different ways in which basically path endings, stroke endings, and corners can be rendered in Illustrator, which are these different settings here. So the capping and corner of a line. So in fact, you can have two different versions. I can have a pointed corner and a round cap. But this becomes really important when you import line work from CAD in, let's say, a made-to-D drawing in which the different line segments won't be joined together. And so oftentimes when you have very sharp corners, you will end up with, and depending on your line weight, you can end up with strange kind of corners, corner points sticking out and actually visually appearing in the drawing. So in that case, it's very helpful to use rounded corners because it will get rid of those unjoined corner edges. And then the really important aspect of editing objects and controlling their appearance is hidden in the appearance panel, and this is something that for me wasn't obvious that this is part of Illustrator, and after discovering it, I mean, it radically can change the way you are able to work with objects. So so basically the idea is I talked about simple strokes and fills, but the idea in Illustrator is that a single object can have really as many strokes and fills as you want. And so if you click on these objects here that I placed here, so this is just a single, and you can look at them in the layer panel too. It's just a single rectangle, a single object that has two strokes and two fills applied to it, and each of these can be, the opacity of each of these can be individually controlled, and also I can stack these strokes and fills as I want them. So right now my cyan stroke is thinner than the magenta, and it's a dash line and it's placed in front, but I can by just dragging these, I can reposition them, and by now it's not visible anymore, so it's not really the point. But also I can I can hide them and display them. Oops, let's just undo. At will. So it's using this functionality of appearance is a really will really make your life easier if you're sort of refining your drawing and you are not sure what effects you want to apply, then the fact that you can turn them on and off instead of having to copy the objects to a new layer and turn layers on and off, and also if you make changes to the geometry, then you will end up with multiple layers where you have to do that. And believe me, I have done this a lot before realizing I can use this functionality. So it really speeds up the process. And then also this object here below. I'll talk about these effects a little later, but you can see that this appearance panel is also where various effects that are applied to objects are displayed. So this is also, you can see from the bounding box that this is actually a rectangle, and so I have applied a 3D rotation to it. So this is the original object that I drew, and so it's displayed in isometric view, and I gave it a drop shadow and a feathered edge and an opacity, and all of these are kind of controlled at will. So I can click on the drop shadow and change its opacity in this really easy way. Yes? Yeah. So this is the appearance panel. Basically shows the properties for one object, or if I select multiple objects, then you will get this, that they have mixed appearances, and actually I cannot edit them all together. So yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this list lists everything about the appearance of this object. So just to go back to the much simpler examples, or just to make a kind of dumb rectangle here, what you get here is this box has a stroke and a fill, and it describes the dashed line. So basically what I'm saying is that you can use this panel for any kind of object, but when it really becomes useful is when you apply multiple appearances, and also when you apply effects, because basically if I have this object with a drop shadow, and if I go to effects and go into drop shadow, then I'm actually going to get this message that I'm basically, there is an option to apply a new drop shadow instead of editing the old one. So so not to get and so I could do this, and so now there's a drop shadow under the drop shadow, but to be able to oversee everything that's going on is that's what this panel is really useful for. Yes, but I would think that adding multiple appearances to one object is still going to result in a smaller file size than if I copy this object multiple times and treat, like I could have a box that just has a fill and then one that has a stroke without a fill, and I mean, depending on what you're doing, you still might want to do that. Basically, the issue is again, to be able to select objects with the same appearance, and I think I pointed that out. So and these are all kind of unique, but if I click on one of these lines, then if I go into select same appearance, then yeah, so actually nothing else got selected because there is no other line that has this kind of specific dash. But let's say I make a rectangle that has this same characteristics, and then once again go and select same appearance, or maybe it was the wrong one. then it should, yeah, now both of them are selected. So so applying appearances is just a matter of being mindful of which objects you are doing it to, and like within a layer. Um, and so I guess to make sure you keep your file organized according to layers, and then according to appearances as well. So I still recommend keeping objects with the distinct appearance in a distinct layer together. But sometimes you might have many different objects that, let's say, have 50% opacity across layers, and you can really easily select them through this option and then change that opacity. Okay, and then yeah, so then I also wanted to talk about type, and of course Illustrator is a kind of full graphic design software. On the other hand, I would say that while we of course work with type in Illustrator, InDesign actually has even more functionalities for type. So when you're composing boards and adding annotation, I would consider at least consider whether you want to do that here or in InDesign. But basically, as far as Illustrator is concerned, the type tool for which the shortcut is T is the tool you will be using. And to distinguish, and I think this is the same across InDesign and Illustrator, distinguish between so-called point type and area type. So once again, this is easy to get by looking at the examples that I placed here. Point type is basically a kind of fixed box that when you start editing it and scaling it, you are actually scaling the type itself, and you're changing the font size and the kind of vertical and horizontal the horizontal spacing, or sort of stretching really. On the other hand, if you have an area type, then you are scaling the bounding box for the text, the box in which the text is placed. So I mean, usually I use area type, but there's a use for both of them. And the way to switch between them is by clicking. You can see if I select both of these. Actually, you can only see if I select each. So a point type has this unfilled circle, and an area type has it filled. And so you can switch between the two by double clicking on that little circle. So now this turned into an area type bounding box. And similarly, I can turn this into a point type, and then the bounding box actually gets resized to the dimension of the text itself. And then this example is showing how you can draw a custom path and use the type tool to write on that path. So I can take the pen tool and draw whatever kind of curve. And right now I gave it a stroke, but as soon as I start typing on it, it turns into a text path. So its stroke will disappear. So this can be useful if you have some custom shape that you want to annotate. Yeah, and then the other two panels that are really useful, which once again, if you know how to use InDesign, you will be familiar with. Hopefully, if you're not, I really recommend to be using these, is the character and paragraph panels, and then really importantly, the character styles and paragraph styles panels. So the first two are a bit more obvious. They are basically used to adjust kind of on the spot different characteristics of type. So the font type, font size, horizontal and vertical spacing, adding different kind of effects, or making it, all caps or superscript and so on. While paragraph controls the spacing of paragraphs, and you can do hyphenation and so on. But where it gets really really useful in terms of, again, file organization is to start using character styles and paragraph styles. So you can see that I'm using both of these in this document. So if I don't click on anything, so I'm just editing these styles, then let's say if I go into this and just by double clicking not on the name but on the line, you can get into this options menu. I can make changes to, let's say, the font type, and so if I apply this, then everything you can see, everything that it was applied to, all these keyboard shortcuts have changed because when I was typing these texts, I applied this character style to them. So if you have a lot of, for your current drawings too, if you have a lot of annotation with the same font, then of course you can place those annotations on a separate layer and then be able to select them all together, but it's really the most expedient way to edit multiple instances of text together is to use character and paragraph styles. So I really highly recommend, as soon as you pass, above like 10 instances of text, like how many times you want to click to change the font color, for instance, it really becomes useful. So when you're working on a drawing and you pass that critical number of annotation instances, then I would stop and think about adding character styles. So you don't have to do it later when you have like 50 of them, and it always takes more time to like select things and apply a style. Mm-hmm. The character size. So once again, all the panels that I'm showing, you can access them from the window menu. So here they would be under type, and then character styles, paragraph styles. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then two things that that are also really essential for editing geometry are so-called pathfinder operations and compound paths. And for the first one, the tool panel usually sits together with transform align and pathfinder. So you can turn it on from the window menu. And so what Pathfinder does is a bit similar to Boolean operations in Rhino, except it really just happens in 2D. So I have an example here of a blue square on top of an orange circle, and I cycled through all these different available operations, and I just recommend you to try them out to see what you get. But basically, you can unite two shapes. You can use one shape to trim another shape. You can take their intersection and define a new shape from it. You can remove the overlap, and sometimes when you undertake these operations, you will end up with grouped shapes or compound paths, and I will explain in a second what the latter term is. So in this case, I created this group that I can ungroup, and I have two distinct shapes. And then you can do these other number of operations, which again, this is a really easy way to be kind of switching between, let's say, drawing with the pen tool when you are defining outlines versus drawing shapes, quick shapes, and then using them to cut each other up and draw really quickly. Of course, depending on what you're doing, because this might seem kind of random, but I find that I use Pathfinders quite a lot. And so the related idea to Pathfinders is that of compound paths, and this is once again something that I remember not knowing what these things are, and you encounter them in files and don't really know how to deal with them. Can be sort of annoying, but once you realize, they can become really productive. So basically what I have here again is is different object. And so this blue and magenta composition is two examples of making a compound path from, in this case, just the first two objects, and in this case, all three of them. So, and this, you can see that this is actually identical to one of the pathfinder operations. So the two are kind of related in the sense that they are treating these shapes and looking at their relationship and then defining a kind of common shape from them. So, oops, I just locked the text. Oh yeah, this is on the wrong layer. So if I take these objects and let's just start with these two. You can either right-click on them and then click on Make Compound Path, or go into Object and Compound Path and click on Make, or press Shift-8. Then you will end up with what is on the top left corner is labeled as a compound path, and in your layer group 2, it's a single object. So this is not a group. This is not just holding together totally distinct shapes. It's actually one path that is made of two parts, but it's treated as a single path. And so depending on how your objects overlap or not, you will end up with different results. But basically, as you can see here down below, this is a shape which is once again, if I move it around, and yeah, it's above the other objects. It's a single shape that consists of four different paths. So one path defines the outline of the rectangle, and then these three ellipses define the cutout holes. And where this becomes really really helpful is not just creating these custom shapes, but also creating clipping masks, which is another thing I think that's in the next file that I will get to. And so once again, this path is a result of a pathfinder operation. So in this case, I used the three ellipses that I just drew over this rectangle and subtracted them from the box, and then I end up with this shape. But actually, there would be another way when I just draw a rectangle and just to show you what I'm doing, change the color and then draw these shapes and then select them and make a compound path, and I will end up with the same result. Depending on how your geometry is overlapping, there are different options, and so that's when it's useful to use Pathfinder to be more specific in what you want to do. Yeah, so then let's move on to the next file, in which, yeah, I think the first thing I'm looking at here is what are called clipping masks. And before I even mention this, there's something in the left to a panel that I want to bring your attention to. Is these three different icons that allow you to, and probably your drawing mode is switched to the left one, which is called, if you mouse over it, it should display the name. It's called Draw Normal, which basically means that if I'm drawing different shapes, as I'm kind of drawing a new shape over another one, it's going to draw it in front of it. But if you switch to the next one, which is called Draw Behind, then if I make a shape, it's going to end up behind the existing ones, which can be really helpful if you know that you want to place something behind other objects. And so this saves you the time of having to click the object and arranging it in the stacking order, which I think I showed, that can be accessed from this context menu. And then the last really nice feature, the third one, is called Draw Inside, and for that, let me make another shape here that's a bit bigger. So let's say I have this rectangle here, and so by selecting this rectangle, I activate Draw Inside, so you can see that this sort of dashed crop marks appear around this object. And so this is the object I'm drawing inside right now, and so so I'm doing these really simple shapes, but I hope it's clear what is happening. So I drew this ellipse, and it's basically placed inside this box. So this box is acting as a so-called clipping mask. And once again, I'm placing this on the wrong layer here. So if we look at what we are doing, this group of objects, and if I just click on it, all of the elements will be selected, is actually called a clip group. So there is a rectangle that's acting as the clipping mask, and then there are these ellipses that are placed inside this clipping mask. And so this can be really helpful, kind of moving beyond these simple boxes and ellipses, can be really helpful when you have multiple elements in a drawing that you want to overlay on top of each other. And let's say you have a diagram and you want to pull out the, or yeah, so you want to kind of pull out a detail and you want to place that on top of another element in the drawing, and you want to define the boundary of that detail. So going back to the slideshow I showed, in the drawing on the right, each of these kind of bubbles are they are many set of layers grouped in different layer groups, and then there are many clipping masks that are applied to basically organize this information. So I didn't trim all the lines to fit into a circle shape. They actually extend in the drawing file. They are just held in place with clipping masks. And so so besides using the draw inside function, what you can do is basically, if you have a set of different objects, so let me actually just release this. So if I have these objects, then I can manually select them and right-click and say make clipping masks. And in this case, this is a little bit different than drawing inside, is that the topmost object, which in this case was the rectangle, turns into a clipping mask. So if you look at this clip group, this rectangle lost all its appearances. The only thing about it is that its shape is defining the clipping mask. And so all of these other objects have been clipped inside it. And your clipping mask can be any shape, any kind of closed path. And the really nice thing is that a clipping mask can also be a compound path. So so let's say I want to take all these graphics, but that are placed here. But for some reason, I just want to clip them with these two rectangles. So I can make a compound path from these rectangles, and then I can select all of these objects, and it's sort of futile for some of them because they totally fall outside the frame. But I can make a clipping mask from these, and I guess I didn't select everything, but you can see that they actually became part of this. All of this miscellaneous objects became part of this clip group. So it's really a handy way to organize and kind of crop things really quickly. And there's one more way you can do this, which is actually using doing this to all the elements of a layer. And so let's just move this over here. So what you see here in this ellipse, if you look at the layers in the file, um, is basically a clipping mask that is placed on a distinct layer. And so your layer panel actually offers you the way to just kind of with one click create a clip group. And that's, if you look on the bottom of your layer panel, there's a little two squares overlapping icon that says make release clipping mask. So the way this works is you shouldn't have anything selected in the layer. Always the topmost object is going to become the clip group. And so just by clicking on the name of the layer and turning this on and off, you are forcing the topmost geometry to become the clipping mask. And what's really nice about this is it works by layer, so you can organize your elements by layer as opposed to making clipping masks sort of separately. Each has its role, of course, because sometimes you just want to make a few objects within a layer into a clipping mask, and sometimes you have, and I could do this with sublayers as well. So if you haven't really explored, then I encourage you to do so. The fact that you can stack as many layers inside each other as you want, which will be really helpful once you end up with a more complex file. So again, jumping back to this example, each of the different scale elements of this drawing have their layer group, and then within that I have many layers. So this file has between 100 and 150 layers to organize the elements so that everything that has a different appearance is in a separate layer, so I can change the line weights really quickly and also move things around. And it's just gonna make your life much easier if you keep your files organized. And in a second I'll show an example of a file that I worked on recently, and it's kind of it is a necessity for it to be organized because of the amount of content. And then the next thing that I want to talk about here is the Align tool, which again usually you can find alongside the Pathfinder. So that's the icon for it. And this is a really sort of self-explanatory tool. Oops, let me just tidy things up here a bit. Yeah, you can see that some of the things I created here were placed on the wrong layer. So so when you have a set of objects, you can basically really quickly orient them as you want. So I can align all of the bottom edges of these objects, or I can space them equally, or I can align them to their center. And I mean, again, just trying each of these out will explain what they do. But I think what I already might have shown, and what's really where it gets really nice with the Align tool, is that you don't you aren't only able to use the black arrow, the selection tool, but also the white arrow, the direct selection tool. So I have these unequally spaced lines here, and maybe I don't want to align the lines themselves, I just want to align their bottom endpoints. So I can just mouse over that with my direct selection tool, and then let's say space them equally, or if they were, let's say some of them were not aligned horizontally, then I can align again to the bottom. And so so that you can create or edit line work very quickly by just grabbing parts of the points and using the line. Okay, and then one thing that is also, I mean, in a way, it could be considered basic and I haven't covered yet is how to work with raster images, and there are two main things I think everyone should be familiar with. Is one, of course, is how to manage raster artwork in a vector file, and so in that sense, the kind of key question is about pasting versus placing raster imagery. So to follow along here, I recommend that you activate your links panel. So you can see here that I have a number of, which actually lists all the both the placed and embedded raster imagery. So you can see that the image on the left here is directly copy pasted into this file. So the file itself contains basically the pixels of this image, and so by pasting this image into the file, I'm increasing the file size, and it also allows me to make changes to this file, and those changes will be permanent and dependent on my Illustrator file. On the other hand, this image on the right, which it appears different only because of the way it is being displayed. It's the very same image. It is being linked from a JPEG file, and so if you check these different icons on the bottom, then basically I could open this image, look for it in my hard drive, or actually I think there's a I guess maybe not in Illustrator. In InDesign, you can right-click on linked images and directly open them in Photoshop. But I can open this image in Photoshop and make a change to it, and then that change will be updated. So I can click on this little update icon and update the changes to the image. And also, the thing about this image is that since it's being placed in the file, it is not increasing my file size as much. Of course, there's still information saved about the image, where it's placed and what its opacity and so on. So that remains. The more raster images you place in Illustrator, the slower your slower and bigger your file will become. But in general, I recommend placing images as opposed to pasting them to still better manage your file size. But sometimes I guess one of the reasons why you would bring in images is maybe you actually are working with images as part of your layout, or you are using it as a kind of transparent reference, like a satellite image behind your drawing. Or maybe you're bringing in a raster image because actually you want to vectorize it and take information from it. And so for that, the tool that you can use is called image trace. So when I have either a placed or pasted image, when you click on the image itself, the top menu offers you this choice to trace the image, and you can just click on image trace, in which case Illustrator is going to analyze the image and choose what it thinks is the best option or built-in preset for the tracing, or you can go into the presets and change what you think or what you want to achieve. So the really nice thing is that when you have a colorful image and maybe you want to create a kind of simplified graphic from it, you have this option to render it with 3, 6, or 16 colors. So if I go for 3 colors, basically I will end up with a series of vector shapes that only use these 3 colors. So it allows me to kind of create a consistent aesthetic. Of course, you can see that the result is, in this case, maybe too abstract. So depending on how big this is and what I want to do with it, um, it may not be sufficient. And of course, image trace really is contingent on the original resolution of your image. And be mindful that if you place a huge image and go for, let's say, in fact, any kind of preset, it might take quite a long time and potentially can crash your Illustrator too. So make sure you save before doing some really large image tracing. Yeah.
So if you do an image trace, it's still going to be like an image, like the tracing will be.
Okay, and so yeah, and so then once you've traced an image, then if you look at it in the layers panel, what it is still an image. It's an image tracing. So in a way, this kind of algorithm is applied to it. But if you actually want to go and edit this as a vector graphic, you have to click on expand, and so what happens then is from this TIFF, a group is created that is made of all these different paths. And so um, what now I can do is ungroup this object, and it's often sort of grouped multiple times together, so you may have to ungroup several times. And maybe I want to delete the background, and maybe I actually want to delete everything that's this light brown color, so I select the same fill color and delete it, and maybe I don't, like this sticking out thing here, and want to get rid of the annotation. And so maybe, this is what I wanted, and so now I end up with a bunch of vector shapes, which can be recolored, and I can give it a stroke and whatsoever. It's just like any other shapes that I may have drawn inside Illustrator. So this is a process when you're completely turning a raster image into a vector image. And I mean, the occasions when I would use it wouldn't be this sort of more detailed image like this map, but for instance, if you're looking for vector people, often what you find online is these kind of JPEG files of people shapes, not vector files, because often you have to pay for those or they are just not available. And depending on their resolution, you can create quite successful shapes. Or I have done it with various other things like trees, let's say. Um, so this is a really handy tool to bring in things that you only can have access an image of, and you don't want to take your pen tool and start tracing over it and draw it manually. Okay, so that's about kind of the basics of raster. And then one really amazing tool I want to show you is called symbols, and this really works similar to blocks in CAD or in Rhino. And so I think these are already made into symbols. So if you activate your symbols panel in the window, through the window menu, and click on these objects, you can see that the way they are displayed, there is this kind of plus sign, which in this case is at the corner. And basically, when you look at these elements in the layer stack, they just have this name called orange blue, which is how I named this symbol. And so the idea here is that this is a block that I drew this one shape and made it into a symbol. And so and I can at will make a copy of it, or edit it, transform it however I want. But the idea is that if I edit any instance of this symbol, all the other instances are going to change. And how you do that is you just double click, and you can see that I double clicked on this rotated shape, and when it's in editing mode, it actually displays the original shape of how I defined the symbol. And this little plus sign marker in the top left corner is actually, that's the reference point for the symbol. which I'll show you in a second how to create a new one. Just want to demonstrate how this is working. So I can take this circle and change its color, and once I exit my uh, um, exit editing this one instance, it updates all the other instances, and also in the symbol library it will have updated. And so basically you can make anything into a symbol, any kind of assortment of artwork with any appearance. So you just basically draw something, and just to show, I can do both shapes and lines. And apply whatever uh, kind of properties you want to it. And I don't really know what this is, but I want to make it a symbol. And so for convenience, you can group it together, but you don't really have to. All you have to do is open the symbols panel and drag this group, and then this window pops up asking you to name it something. And then to be honest, I'm not quite sure what movie clip is. It doesn't really seem to make a difference. I'm sure there's some difference there, but obviously what we are looking for is graphic. And so you can change where how it is registered, which will become relevant for aligning the object. So if I want to align these symbols, it will always reference that little mark that's placed at the top left corner. So you can register them by their center or any of the corner points, and go with dynamic symbols, so it will update as you want. And so it was added to my library. So once again, if I make a copy of it and make a change, which can be resizing the shape itself, it updates. And so what's really nice about this is that this again will increase the performance of your file. If I make 1,000 copies of these, if I actually copy it, it will be much heavier on my file than if I use a single symbol. And moreover, I have the ability um, to edit them all together. And if you decided that one of the instances of your symbols, or maybe all of them, you no longer want to be linked, then if you click on a symbol, you can see on the top menu, you can click on break link, in which case it gets turned into just, in this case, it's not even a group, it's just a kind of sub-layer of these shapes. And so you can pull them apart and so on. Yeah, and maybe at this moment, before I talk about the last few things, so I have this. Actually, I'm going to show you a PDF of a file that I'm going to show you open, because the file itself is sort of pushing the limits of my computer, unfortunately. But this is a drawing that yeah, and even this PDF is a little too large. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. It's a drawing that I worked on. Yeah, let me just. Oh, there we go. I worked on with 5 other people for a competition recently. It's an A0 drawing, so it's really large. And just to zoom in a little bit, I mean it's quite highly detailed, and everything in it is. Well, everything is drawn in Illustrator in the sense that the buildings were modeled, they were pulled from 3D Warehouse in SketchUp and various sources, and made 2D in Rhino, and then the 2D graphic was brought into Illustrator, and they were all cleaned up and live painted to a color. And in the case of yeah, basically all of the buildings that you can see are made into symbols, so they can be multiplied and edited together in terms of line weight. Um, and so why I want to show this file is, well, as an example of a complex drawing that, I mean, an example of what things you can do in Illustrator, although we didn't really add many effects to the drawing, so it's mostly shapes filled with color. But really, in terms of file organization, it's an example where, in fact, multiple Illustrator files are linked together. So just to go back to Illustrator, yeah. Well, at the moment, I can't because it's still in the competition, but maybe later. I can give you a quote. Um, So I have this file open here, and it's gonna be a little bit painful because um, it's again a little bit. It's like a 40 megabyte Illustrator file, which is quite big for an Illustrator file. And so right now I'm to be able to even do anything. I'm displaying it with outline view, which I'm not sure I mentioned in class, but basically if you go to view right now, here on the top, if you are just in regular view, you should have this option to view in outline, and so for me it's the reverse, to view with my graphics processor. And so if you have a really large file and kind of cannot anymore move around in it, then you can turn on outline view. So if I turn this on, it's gonna take a while to display. So first I want to just bring your attention um, to looking at these layers and how this file is organized. So just to show you, if I make a new layer here, that will be layer 68. So there are 67 layers in the file to keep it organized. And because it's a kind of layered drawing, so we have these rows of houses, so things are actually stacked accordingly. Um, you can see it's kind of a pretty logical naming. So I have row 1, which is front elevation, and then in that layer I have cars 1, trees 1, houses 1, and then it kind of keeps going like that. And more than just having these layers, in fact, what you saw as the people and furniture in the drawing, they are created in 5 other Illustrator files because there were too many of us working together to just have one person manage everything. So everyone had their own file and place in the drawing that they were working on, and those files are actually, if we go to the links panel here, you can see that all these Illustrator files um, are linked into this file, and the way it works is that all of those files have the same page size, and we have used a sort of JPEG export of this very drawing and reference it back in each file to be able to see the totality of the drawing at the same time as working on it. So it's a kind of loop of working on the master drawing and then working on the parts. And so these Illustrator files are placed inside here. So let me get to this. So you can see here, this is a linked file, and let's see if I can actually show you what I mean. So this is gonna take a little bit here. But so this, just going back to this outline view, it basically only shows the very outline of objects, and it doesn't show effects, and you can see it doesn't show linked files, so there are no people right now in this display. Yeah, and I mean, in a way, it can be said it's a bad example because you don't want this to be happening to you. I mean, working on such a huge drawing and with so many people is, I mean, it's not something that we do all the time, and I guess in retrospect, I would be even more careful about how to manage the content. And so when I say that symbols help you reduce file size, it's still a lot of lines in this drawing, and that's another advice, to be really careful when you make 2D things in Rhino, and let's say you use 3D models from SketchUp, and sometimes it's really impossible to clean it up. You will end up, I mean, even in Rhino, sometimes you have so many lines that it takes a while to move objects around. But once you bring those into Illustrator, it really can become a serious problem in terms of how much geometry there is. So yeah, it looks like it's taking too long to display this. And yeah, believe me, it wasn't fun at the end of this process, and also compressing this file was a pain. But yeah, I mainly wanted to show you the organization, and really really encourage you to think about that, um, and use enough layers and so on. For basically for the things that the buildings that you see in 3D, and for some of the furniture, although most of the things that you see, the kind of colorful things here, were just drawn in 2D by hand, basically, by kind of a few people who are really into Illustrator. So yeah, just to show one, and I don't know, this might again take a little bit, but so yeah, the people in the very front here, they belong to this linked file, which let me see. I think I need to Yeah, this is just. Just believe me that's each of these bands of groups of people is a separate file. Yeah, I think I'm not gonna make this work. Okay, so going back to the tutorial file, there could be many things, and you can see I sort of in fact left this open because I realized there's just no time to cover everything. But going into sort of more advanced things that you can do, one of them would be using effects, and I showed a few things already. So here I basically, the source of where you can find these effects is in the effect menu, and they are grouped into two groups. One is Illustrator effects and one is Photoshop effects. So if you use Photoshop a lot, you will be familiar with many of these, and it's really nice that you can actually apply these raster effects in Illustrator. So if you're like me, who just likes working in Illustrator as much as possible and not really dealing with Photoshop, then you can do many things without having to switch back. And so the ones that I have included here are just sort of, I guess, my favorites, or the ones I use quite a bit. So definitely look through them. What is necessary to be able to manage these again is to have your appearance panel activated. So for instance, this is just a simple rectangle, and these two other objects next to it are actually the same rectangle with some effects applied. So if I turn off 3D rotate in this case and 3D revolve in this case, I end up with the same shape. So yeah, this is a really nice feature that Illustrator and Photoshop also, they are able to handle three-dimensional shapes. So I should dig this up and I can put it in Dropbox, but I have this 3D globe, vector globe, that can be rotated at will to look at whatever continent you want to, and it's an actual three-dimensional object. It's not a flat line work. That's an Illustrator file, and so in this case, what I did is, and I'll just do it with this square, went into 3D rotate and chose one of the isometric view, so I can do an isometric top view of this rectangle, and you can preview it so you can see what you're doing. And of course, you can do a custom angle, so you can rotate these objects in 3 dimensions at will. And then in this case, it's actually revolving it to create this sort of 3D shape, which is, I mean, the 3D revolve is not something I've made use of, especially because we have 3D modeling tools available. So in a way, it's equally quick to make a cylinder if that's what I wanted. Um, and so what I can do with both of these objects is, if I'm happy with the transformation and in fact want to more closely edit them, then I can expand the appearance. So then I guess here I end up with this group that is made of these these different parts that are forming this 3D shape that actually has this kind of shadow applied to it to describe it as a 3-dimensional illusion, really. And now that I expanded this isometric view, it's actually turns into this kind of parallelogram that you can see that the bounding box is now fit to the object. And then these are examples of being able to create zigzag or wavy lines really quickly, again, by applying effects. So, so this one has a zigzag applied to it that you can control the size. So I can, by turning on preview, I can give it a different amplitude and also how many rides per line segment there are. And basically the option between wavy and sharp is located in this window as well. And then yeah, some of the other effects that you can use, like I think this is feathering the edge of a shape or applying a drop shadow. And then lastly, there's a really nice kind of extension of transforming an object that also is accessible from effects. So just to bring your attention to the fact that this series of rectangles is actually, it's one object that has a transform effect applied to it. And so if I click on this transform, you can look at what I've done. So, and these transformations are applied simultaneously. So I have scaled it for 50% horizontally and by 75% vertically. And again, I can be updating these values of live, so I can make it, let's say, 60%. And I have moved it horizontally by 1 inch and vertically by ½ an inch. And I could actually at the same time rotate these objects as well. And then why there are so many, because I specify that I want 10, or I could have 15 copies. And in this case, because I'm scaling it down, it's actually applying this transformation to every instance, new instance of the object. So I end up with this kind of fractal pattern. If I just get rid of the scaling, then what I would end up with is oh, I scaled it to 0%. Just want to leave it at 100 here. So then I would just end up with the same shape being copied over. And you don't need to be so fancy. This transformation can be really useful just to basically create what's the equivalent of array in Rhino. And the nice thing is once you have applied this transformation, you can because this is not 16 distinct objects, it's one object copied over. So again, it's kind of like a parametric operation in a way. So I can change the color and it applies to all the instances. And if I wanted to actually break these apart, then I can go into object and expand appearance, and then I end up with first a group, and then I can ungroup and edit each of them separately. And then lastly, somewhat related to this is again a tool that I'm not super familiar with, but can be very useful to create kind of a quick transition between two geometries. Is the blend tool, which you can find right in the bottom part of the tool palette. And so what is happening here, I think, let me just remember how I did this, is that I think you start with two shapes, and then uh-oh. Yeah, then you apply the blend tool, and so you have to double click on the tool itself to get this window where you can specify how many steps you want. So why it's looking so much like a gradient, because there are so many instances. So if I just go down to something like 5, then I end up with something that's easier to see. And so the idea with the blend tool is that there is basically a path. You can see there's this kind of straight line here along which this blending is taking place, and the blending is taking place between any kind of appearance. So it's right now it's only blending between shape and fill, but I also could say that this should have a stroke that's orange, and it's 3 points, and then this guy, and I might have to reapply the blend tool, but yeah. So in the other example, you can see that it's also changing between, it's switching between an orange fill to a blue fill, and between a blue stroke to an orange stroke. So the kind of intermediary instance gets this kind of greenish color here. And what I want to point out between these two is that you can actually edit this path through which the blending is happening. So I can add more anchor points and sort of make this custom shape. I'm not sure what this would be useful for, but once again, it's a pretty handy simple tool to create 3D shapes instead of drawing them. And then again, you can expand all these objects, and so you will end up with these intermediary transitions as distinct objects. So maybe all you want to use the blend tool for is to create a third shape between two, and you get rid of everything else once you have done that, instead of just sort of showing it this way.